Welcome back to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today I am joined by the director of Vivarium, Lorcan Finnegan. Lorcan, thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I have plenty of questions in mind to ask you, and half of them are kind of like theories on the movie questions, which I don't know if you will be open to answering, because I know like a lot of directors and the writers don't like revealing too much and answering that stuff for people. But then the other half is kind of just for the process of making the film.
I'll answer what I can answer.
So first thing is this an alien film? Because I just assume it's an alien film, but there's really no confirmation throughout that this is alien.
Well, it depends what your definition of alien is, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're talking about aliens from space, alien as the unknown, aliens as, things that we're not familiar with, that aren't human and haven't been catalogued, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a lot of theories around it being them being like aliens or they have some sort of like spacecraft or something, but they're definitely not human.
Well, so I started thinking about that more last night when I was reflecting on the questions I had written, and I was like, because it starts off with the whole scene with the birds, and they're
Mm.
different species of birds, but it's not like a bird and then something completely foreign to what a bird is. And, like when I think about aliens, of course, there's the constant trope of, that they could, wear our skin or something like that. But then I was like, well, what
Mm.
if it's just some other form of human, And I was like, I could be completely wrong that this is even aliens.
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of would be something quite alien. Initially, me and when Garrett Shanley, the writer, when we were talking about it, we were thinking of like something that separated from us a long time ago as some sort of alternative version of a human, some sort of subspecies. But that was like a very early discussion, and since then it kind of developed into something kind of different. But um, but yeah, essentially they're just like a brood parasite, not dissimilar to a cuckoo, and
Mm-hmm.
what we see in the film is just them carrying out their life cycle.
And it's a short life cycle at that.
Yeah.
So you bring up the writer. I was going to ask you because on IMDb, it says it was written by Garrett, but then the story is by both of you. Could you clarify what that
Mm.
means?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird gray area. Basically, it's we both came up with the story together, but he's the screenwriter. He'll write the script, and we'll both read it and talk about it, and then make changes to it and develop it further. So there's a few projects that we have that are like that. That we both kind of collaborate on from the very beginning. And some projects he might have developed further and then sent to me. So it really depends. Yeah, it's kind of a complicated, weird area. And it's sort of annoying because when we released the film, a lot of people just got it wrong, would think that I was the screenwriter and then not give him any credit or
Mm.
get it the other way around. So
I did go back and watch your short film Foxes because I was just trying to watch a video to see exactly how your name was pronounced. And of course, I didn't start off with your name, and I was like, damn it. And I didn't want to like hear too much, and have it influence my questions. But the very first thing they talked about was Foxes. And so I went back to watch that. Did he work on that with you?
yeah, so that was a short story that Garrett had written that
Mm-hmm.
was on his blog. We started collaborating on stuff like probably around 2007, 2008. Um, just kind of riffing on ideas. We'd submitted for funding for the various things, but had been rejected. And I was reading his blog and found this the story Foxes and read it and was like, oh, this is great. Like this could be a short film, but it was written as like a first person conversation, like somebody telling somebody in a pub what had happened to one of their
Mm.
neighbors. So, but it had all of these kind of interesting themes and potential to be quite cinematic. So, we developed it into a script and then went for funding on that through Screen Ireland and got it. So that was our first thing that we actually got made together.
So it's hard to watch that without, seeing similarities between that film and Vivarium with like the cookie cutter neighborhood.
Mm.
And they seem to be the only people living in that neighborhood in Foxes as well as, Vivarium. Did you intentionally want to expand upon that original concept?
Yeah, so like Foxes is quite specific to a sort of socio-economic situation in Ireland, like during the crash in around 2009, kind of by the time it hit Ireland
Mm-hmm.
properly. Like they're, in the middle of nowhere, these housing developments with like hundreds of houses and nobody really living there. And then when the crash came, people who bought in these places were kind of left there isolated. They were promised this kind of, there'll be trains and there'll be community and there'll be this, that, and the other. And it didn't ever come to fruition. So they ended up kind of atomized in these weird places and commuting to the cities. And so that film was much more about that. It was sort of a reaction to what was happening politically and socially. And it was more about like nature and the supernatural kind of encroaching upon these areas that are very man-made and kind of manipulated spaces. So when we made that film, we really wanted to expand the story world into something more universal, more about a kind of consumer capitalist society's version of a world where like everything's like a brochure. You're promised this thing, you go in, and we kind of thought like what would happen if it just went on forever, and
Mm-hmm.
everything was fake. Everything was completely fake as opposed to any nature coming in. There's just nothing. So it's all fake sun, fake clouds, fake looking houses, nothing
Mm-hmm.
natural at all. Like, and then these people in there, like trying to survive in an environment like that, which they can't escape from because it's like a weird, like quantum. Like we kind of thought about it as a kind of blister universe on the surface of the Earth that had its own kind of quantum rules,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that the whole place was, set up and manipulated by this species in order to for them to raise their children because they don't raise their own children, like a cuckoo, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of inspired by us making the short, but also I remember watching this David Attenborough documentary about the life cycle of the European cuckoo and sent it to Garrett, and we thought there was something really horrific about that if it could be transposed into something different. And so the two things kind of dovetailed as we were kind of just having conversations and developing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was the kind of intention for it to be more of a story that was relatable on a kind of Western society front, you know.
So I'm glad you started touching upon basically how that world works, because I have questions about that. I was curious if before you guys made the film, if you had decided in your head how this world works, because it gets pretty trippy
Mm.
towards the end when they start going in through like these potential different dimensions that are lit with different colors. So when Gemma is falling through like the different rooms, and then it's lit with red, then green, then blue. Did you guys intentionally do like an RGB pattern for that?
The first room she goes into is red because we've been to have the most kind of visual impact on your eyes, because what we've been seeing so far is a kind of very green environment with the green houses. So like red is like the opposite to green in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. So really for it to have a kind of visceral assault on your senses. The second room is green, I believe, with the
Mm-hmm.
boy clapping, because it has this kind of toxic, kind of poisonous look, you know. And yeah, and then the third one, yeah, is blue because it has that kind of slightly melancholy feeling of like the guy who's killed himself in the bath, you know,
Mm.
couldn't take it anymore. Um, but that's all subjective experience from Gemma's point of view.
Gotcha.
So for the people in those dimensions, everything's probably looks normal. Their eyes adjust to it. But for her, the reason she's kind of expelled from those various rooms is like she's a foreign body in the wrong place. He's like, vibrating at the wrong frequency or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and is pushed out. Like if you have like a piece of metal in your arm or something, your body will kind of push it out. It's not supposed to be there. So the place kind of expels her until she's back in
Mm-hmm.
her own box, basically, which is part
Gotcha.
of the whole conformity uh, idea as well.
That all sounds great. Definitely not what I thought you guys were like subtly hinting at. This is some sort of alien technology, RGB, like she's stuck in this
RGB.
like this spaceship or something. So I was like reading into a different page.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's good though. I mean, on a certain level, like the weird thing is when you make a film, sometimes you're operating, it's all very fast. You don't necessarily like that wasn't planned, the color shifts when we were shooting it. I mean, even the way it was cut, well, obviously we had to have them or go through the floor and stuff. Um, but it was something I decided to do in post. A lot of the time, like when you're making those decisions, you don't even necessarily understand the film yourself until you look at it, a year later or something, and you have a different
Mm-hmm.
perspective because like a lot of the things that you're putting into it are coming from your subconscious. So you're not actually even consciously aware. So then things like, yeah, RGB, of course, is like how we kind of experience the world, a blend of those
Mm-hmm.
colors,
Yeah.
particularly through like computers and screens and stuff like that.
It's like one of my favorite things about this genre of film is that I feel like this genre more than any other, there's so many different ways to interpret, or like people are pulling so many other
Mm.
experiences from the film rather than it being like a face value. This is what it is, even if it's written that way.
Yeah, but like even between me and Gareth, the writer, or like the producers, like we all would have a different understanding of certain things. And nobody's right or wrong, because basically
Mm-hmm.
we know as much as the characters who are in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and they don't really know what's going on from
Yeah.
their point of view. So, but yeah, same here. I really like films that are open to interpretation because your imagination becomes part of the process. Becomes
Mm-hmm.
a collaborator in the whole thing. So
Yeah.
you start like bridging the gaps between things and
Mm-hmm.
imagining things. So that's why like sometimes things are more frightening when they're not fully explained because they remain unsolved in your mind, which then
Mm-hmm.
end up haunting you.
In your film, I think you guys walk that line perfectly of, we have this alien as in like foreign type of species here, but we don't get to see much, even though you're living in their world. We see the throat bubble up and we see him, the young adult version, sprint under, like on all fours under the curb. That's about it. To me, I feel like there's nothing worse in a horror film where you see everything there is to see about the creature, because I feel like it most of the time doesn't do it full justice. And so I felt like that was perfect, really packed the punch of scarring me for sure.
Right. Good. Good.
With that throat, was that done practically?
Yeah, yeah. We had like a prosthetic neck and a little tube going under Sennon's shirt. Guys on the ground basically blowing into it. It's like a bladder. Yeah, it's done practically. And then there's some like VFX added to the practical
Mm-hmm.
prosthetic with like veins kind of appearing.
It reminded me of watching something like The Thing, where it just looked top tier. And I think that's probably the best way to do it, is combining practical with the visual effects element. So you can just, it's like adding extra seasoning onto it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean it's great when it's in camera and it's there and it's done. It's also more fun, from a
Mm-hmm.
filmmaking point of view to actually work with these artists and you do something and you get to play around with it and it each take is different then as well because like it depends on the pressure of the person blowing um and all of
Right.
that. So yeah,
Was
yeah,
Gemma falling through the floor a practical effect? How did you guys
yeah.
pull that off?
That was tricky one to figure out. Got like a maybe 12-foot frame, had carpet on it, had like some objects that were in the scene attached to it, like and the camera attached to the frame, and then holes in the bottom. And we basically lifted the frame up as she stood there going, "Ugh," but because the camera was attached to the frame, It looked like she was sinking.
That's cool. I didn't even think about that. That's sweet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had about like 10 minutes to shoot that scene. So
Mm.
it was uh it was problem solving on the go.
So was the background, I can't remember what the background looks like, but was that done through CG then to make it look like the background is going up too, or?
No, so like in the wider shots as we're kind of cutting across the woman who's crying at the table, um, she's just going down. She's going, you know, down
Mm.
on by like bending her knees. So
Gotcha. Dang, that's
it
crazy.
was all just done quite simply, yeah.
In that last scene, I noticed that Gemma's wearing a yellow shirt, but nowhere
Yeah.
else in the movie did I notice a yellow shirt. And is there I would imagine that was intentional. Is that just, like some color symbolism or?
There's a lot of kind of color theory going on in the film, but like that color yellow has a sort of visceral feeling to it. It's quite a violent color. Well, at the very start of the film, Jesse's character is wearing that, and he takes it off and throws it in the back of her car.
Mm,
And she says like, "Oh, you stink," and he's like, "Oh, I'll change my shirt," and he puts on a different shirt because he's all sweaty, and
I
that's where
missed
it came
that.
from. There's like the emotional connection between he's just died, so she puts on his shirt to kind of
Hmm.
smell him, be close to him, while she waits for the boy in the car with the pickaxe.
Yeah, kind of embodies his violence towards the boy the entire
Yeah.
time too. Yeah. Now I'm curious, was Martin the realtor, is his name supposed to be Martin because it sounds like Martian? I know we've already talked about the alien thing, but I was like, seems so close.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe Garrett came up with his name Martin. I don't know. It's quite an inane kind of name
Yeah.
for like an estate agent, Martin. Um,
Hmm.
but maybe somewhere in the back of his mind, that's where it came from.
Okay. And then I got to ask this too about the boy's outfit. And, it stays pretty consistent with, like, I don't know, black pants, white shirt. And he eventually
Mm.
even comes home with a book. And I couldn't help but think he's looking more and more like a Mormon the entire movie. And he's like going, it looks door to door, houses kind of thing. And I was like, was that intentional?
Well, not necessarily Mormons, but yeah, I mean, the Mormon aesthetic was definitely an inspiration, but also just the black and white. Like, this it's that was kind of about the conformity aspect of the film, where like things are black and white. There's no kind of nuance in between. Whereas human life and the gamut of emotions and everything are something these guys can't understand. They don't. Um, they're not human, so they don't love or they don't form any kind of relation. You can't reason with them, which is why um, he wears black and white. It's just, and also the rattle he makes is kind of inspired by the sound of a magpie, which is a black and white bird. And then the stuff that he watches on the screen is black and white as well.
Hmm.
The fractal patterns, which are also kind of connected to the design of these kind of housing developments, which work off a fractal pattern to fit as many in as they can. And yeah, so that, but I mean, like in real world situations, then like priests, like Catholic priests wear like black with like a white collar, and
Hmm.
Mormons often wear like white shirt, black pants. But that's because they're part of something that has quite a rigid structure in terms of rules.
I just thought about this now too, talking religion, like how rigid the ideology can be or whatever. The fractal patterns that they're watching on TV are, kind of like hypnotizing. It's almost like they're,
Mm.
like being brainwashed into a thing. And I don't know if that was any sort of commentary that you're making with them, if that's just how they get their information, or if they're just immediately supposed to be conformed into Martin.
For me, anyway, that's like how they get their information. It's like it's such an alien language. Like it's such a something that's not familiar to Tom and Gemma, but that's also for me anyway, it was reflective of like uh parents not understanding what their kids are looking at on the internet, or
Mm.
why they're into TikTok or whatever, or
Yeah.
unboxing videos. That go, why he wants, what is that? So like it's just that gap between like generations as well, like why younger generations being kind of hypnotized and transfixed to screens, when another generation just can't understand that. So there's sort of a mirror going on there between contemporaries, in contemporary society.
Right. I didn't even pick up on that, but that's great now that you point that out. What is that like making like a horror psychological thriller with a young kid? Like what kind of like balance do you have to walk there to like make sure you're not scaring the kid, or I don't know, like what can and can't they be a part of? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like he was great. Sounding, he definitely wasn't frightened of anything. He was
Hmm.
maybe frightening, but
Yeah.
he was great. Like we were so lucky to find him. The casting process went on for ages to try and find somebody, because he needed to be about like 7. I think he was 7 when we made the film. So like a lot of kids are still very, they're like kids when they're that age. Um, but he kind of understood the character, and he read. I don't know if he read all of the script, or maybe his mom kind of um took some of it out. But he definitely understood the character, and like during prep and stuff, apparently he was like going around shopping centers, whatever, in the supermarket, like mimicking people, watching how they do things, and
Oh my
getting
God.
into character. But like a lot of the time, young actors are very focused because they don't have like the same amounts of chaos going on in their lives as adults. So this was the thing that he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew all his lines. Um he was very focused, very prepared. Um so he was great. And between takes, he's very funny. He's a lovely kid. Like between takes, he'd be all giddy and jumping up on you. And then when the camera rolls, he just goes straight back into character. Yeah, it's fine. The only tricky thing is like kids' hours. You have to give them
Hmm.
breaks all the time, and they can't do long hours and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I will say that when you said he's more like horrifying or more scary, than him being scared, I can't hear woof woof without like just cringing because there's a little bit of a scar there. That would creep me
Yeah,
out if I
yeah,
saw that kid in a supermarket mimicking me. For sure.
yeah.
I felt like he nailed it. I felt like really all of the people who embodied Martin nailed it. Like just so creepy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So did you guys shoot that in a sound stage? I wasn't sure if you guys were using like green screen to show CG depth, or if ever you guys were using matte paintings or miniatures to like really show how big this neighborhood
Mm.
was, like when they're in the backyard and so on.
We shot the interiors in Ireland on a
Hmm.
on a stage, and we shot the exteriors in like a cold storage warehouse in Belgium, because it was like a co-production. We had to like split the spend across a couple of countries. On the Belgian side, it was this big empty warehouse with had a concrete floor, which we painted black, a section of it to make the road. Then we had like the facades of 3 houses, which were only, I don't know, a couple of meters deep. And it just had like, door, windows, bit of lawn, sidewalk, and the road. So that was it. So we had to use that for everything. So like when we're shooting into it, it would be the background. When we're shooting the reverse angles, there was no background, so we had to basically flip the lighting, flip the
Hmm.
car, take the 9 off the door, and shoot back into the same background. It was such a weird puzzle to figure out. And then
Right.
to do the gardens, we basically took off the porch of the front of the house, covered the little path up to the front door, and put up the fences. So the front gardens became the back gardens.
That's
Um,
crazy.
it was like a weird Rubik's cube. When we would wrap or whatever, the VFX supervisor shot plates of the street under various lighting conditions. We use those 2D plates to create like set extensions. If we needed the other side of the street, or like we'd
Hmm.
flip that's the plate. And then there's a couple of shots that were like fully CG. which were like as the car is driving, which we
Yeah.
shot like from a real car or on a real street, so the camera would react properly, and we
Hmm.
tracked that footage and then replaced it with the houses which had been scanned, photographed for like photogrammetry stuff. And then the kind of top shots looking straight down were 2D matte paintings.
Yeah, you guys did a little bit of everything, it sounds like, and it definitely makes sense why there's so much time on the back end for post. When you guys were shooting, were there any unexpected complications? Something you didn't expect just occurred and kind of threw a wrench in the
Yeah,
gears that you guys had to get creative with?
the hole that Jesse is digging, we couldn't dig a hole into place because
Hmm.
it was like a concrete floor and it was a brand new warehouse, and we couldn't damage it. And it was too expensive to build a set on a raised stage where we could have had like everything up high, and
Right.
then had like some depth down. Jesse had to pretend to be digging this hole when it was only like this deep. So
Oh,
he'd go
wow.
in cross-legged and go down like that, and we had to like put some stuff in front, like expanding foam, that we painted to look like it was came out of the hole. So we had these like croissant shaped pieces that we could move around to hide the fact that he was just sitting on the ground cross-legged, and his shovel was just the handle of a shovel that was like that long. So he was just going.
Dang. So what would you do
Uh,
once, that hole gets deep?
so when the hole got deep, it was a difference. It was a set of a hole that we shot in Ireland, like a whole interior, and then had to like match the conversations up and down the hole
Gotcha.
between Belgium and Ireland. So and there's like one scene where he jumps into the hole. He like jumps in, goes cross-legged, lands on the ground, even though there is no depth. Yeah.
Wow.
I forget myself how there's no hole there.
So I'm curious, have any of your films gone to theaters? Because I can't remember if I ever saw Vivarium come to theaters. And it wasn't until 2020 is when I watched it on Amazon.
Yeah, so it came out in Europe. It came out in like France at the beginning of March, and then about 3 days later, the cinemas closed because of COVID.
Oh, of course.
About 10 days later, it was about to be released in the US, and we, like Jesse and me and Imogen, had flights booked, to go over to promote the film for its theatrical release, and cinemas closed in the US and basically all over the world. So that was that. No more,
Hmm.
no more theatrical release.
One of the last things I want to ask you is what are you working on right now, if you're at liberty to say, because you've been doing auditions?
Yeah, I'm shooting a film in about 7 weeks in
Hmm.
Australia
Oh, wow.
with yeah, it's called Surfer. Nicolas Cage is playing the lead, and it's a psychological thriller set on a beach in Australia.
It's awesome. I'm excited.
Straight after that, I'm supposed to be doing a film that me and Garrett have been developing over a good few years called Goliath. So
Hmm.
that's also that's big. It's much bigger, more complicated film, which is being financed at the moment.
Another psych thriller.
No, it's more like a dark dystopian fable action adventure.
Well, I'm excited to see those. And then I'm definitely going to have to catch up on your other films because I haven't seen Nocebo or Without Name yet.
Don't know if Without Name is available in the US. Maybe it is somewhere. If it's not, let me know. I can find you a link somewhere.
All right, sounds good. Well, before we wrap things up, do you want to, like plug your socials? I know you have a, street photography book for Ireland and or Dublin.
Oh, I do actually. Yeah, yeah. Dublin streets. Yeah. Not really, but like you can go on my Instagram and check it out. It's Lorcan Finnegan.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't really use Twitter very much, but the odd
Hmm.
the odd bit of film news goes on there if something's coming out. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on here. It was great to get a lot of those questions cleared up and hear a little bit insight on the film and just your whole filmmaking process as a whole. And I'll link your social media down below if people want to check it out and keep up with what you're putting out there. But yeah, thank you so much for being on here.